In this video, we are going to use the model class we've created in the previous video in order to create the models such as category, author, year, language, cover type, and location. The first thing we need to do, however, is to import some data into our database. So let's navigate to our editor. The file with data is inside of this assets directory. If we open this data.sql, you'll see there's a number of insert into statements with some random data basically. So what we're going to do first is to import this data into our SQLite database. So opening the terminal window, and I'm within the root of our project. If I do pwd, I'm inside of this advanced search from PHP, as you can see on the left hand side here. And what I'm going to do in order to import this database file into this data file, basically into my SQLite database. First of all, I'm going to log in to my database, which is this books SQLite directly under my root directory. So I'm going to type SQLite 3 and then books.sqlite, hit return. Now that I'm actually logged into a SQLite database, I can read the file. So full stop, read, and then what I'm going to do is assets. I need to type assets /data.sql, hit return, and this has imported the file, basically the data, into all the tables. So in order to check whether the data is there, what I'm going to do first of all is check tables again, and we have author, book, for instance. Let's check authors. So I'm going to do select all from authors and hit return, semicolon obviously at the end, and as you can see the data is here. If we do the same for, let's say, select all from books, semicolon, and there we go, all the data is there. So we have some data in SQLite database. Now let's exit SQLite, so full stop, quit, and let's do the same with MySQL. So let's open the SQL Pro. In my case, we have all the tables here, but at the moment all these tables are empty. If we go to File, Import, and if I navigate to my projects, which is going to be Advanced Search Form, then Assets, and Data.sql, click on Open. That's imported all the records, and as you can see, our records are here. So the next thing I'm going to do, if we go back to our browser, is to try to create models for each of these drop-down menus, and then obviously fetch data from a database and make sure that this data is displayed within these select elements. And then for the radio buttons, same for the available in displaying the locations. So let's go back to the editor. As always, we are going to start with the test. So under the test directory unit, we are going to create a new directory called model, where all our model related tests are going to be stored. The first thing we're going to do is to create the abstract model case class. So let's create a new PHP class, and it's going to be called model case. And before we do anything, let's open our composer.json and let's add this file to the class map for the autoload. So tests, then we go unit model case.php. Save it. Now open the terminal and do the composer dump -autoload, and let's make it optimized. So that will regenerate the autoload, and now including this model case file. Inside of the model case, what we're doing, we're preceding the class with the abstract, because it's never going to be called on its own. It's a super class which is going to be extended. And then this one extends the test case, our default test case. So whatever we have within the test case, at the moment we don't have anything, but perhaps at some point we will also be available within this class. Okay, so we start with the migrate method. Protected function migrate. And what we're going to do here we are going to bind the database instance to the container, so we can easily obtain it whenever we need from within our tests. So container bind, and it's going to be db again, and database manager, and make method. We are going to leave it as default. Let's import all these classes here. So database manager as well. There we go. So that's the migrate first part of the migrate methods when we bind in the database instance. So now we have it available to us whenever we want to perform any interactions with the database. And next thing what we need to do is to migrate all the tables. So new migration manager. This one takes new migration. And then we are passing through as an argument container get, and we're looking for database, which we just bound to this container. And at the end, all this we want to go for the method up. Let me just import all these things so it looks a little bit cleaner. Same for the migration. So that's what it looks like now. So basically, migration manager up method on this migration manager. As you can see, it basically creates all the tables using these migration files that you've downloaded with the exercise files. We pass in the migration through as an argument. If we open this migration manager, you can see migration is then bound to the migration property and used within the migration. And obviously migration needs the database, so container will return the instance of a database. Okay, so that's our migrate method. Let's quickly put some dog blocks here as well. It throws an exception and doesn't return anything, so return void. And then what it does, it simply migrate tables, or migrate database, perhaps a little bit better. Okay, so that's our migrate method, and let me just create a few new lines here. The next method is going to be a setup, which basically will call this migrate before each test is executed. So protected function setup. First of all, we are going to call the setup on the parent class. In our case, it's going to be this because test case doesn't have any PHP unit framework test case. If we check for setup method, there we go. This method doesn't do anything, but obviously could if we decided to create another setup within a test case. But let's extend it anyway. So parent setup, and after this we are just calling our migrate method. So before each test is executed, we're going to have all tables available. And let's again add some dog blocks, return void. And what it does is set up before each test. Okay, and then for the tear down method, protected function tear down, again parent tear down, and then what we're doing is basically do the same thing as we did here, but rather than up method, we're going to call method down to remove all the tables. So we're not trying to recreate them with each setup. Basically, we're removing all the tables and then creating them again fresh for the next, ready for the next test. And for the tear down, dog block as well, throws exception, returns void. And then what it does, it cleans up. So clean up after each test. And that's all inside of our model case. Now let me save it and close it. One thing I wanted to show you, if we open up then migration model and queries, and let's have a look at this SQLite one, we have actually 5 lookup tables. Let's open authors first. As you can see, this table has ID and a name. If we open categories, it has ID and a name. Covers has ID and a name. Languages has ID in the name, and locations does exactly the same. Because of this, all these lookup models will have exactly the same test. In other words, what we can do is to create one master class with all the tests, and then just create subclasses which only return, which have, let's say, one method that returns the instance of this given model, so that the superclass can use it and then perform all these tests on that instance. So inside of the model directory of our tests section, we are going to create another abstract class. This time we are going to call it lookup model case, and let's add it to our composer as well. So after model case, new line, and it's going to be lookup model case. Remove this comma from the end, save it, and again, terminal and composer dump auto load. That's done. So back in the lookup model case, let's make it an abstract class, and this one will extend our model case which we've just created. So model case, because we're gonna need all these migrations before each test. Okay, and what we are also going to do is to use model data. So use model data. You remember the class we've created earlier? If we look at the traits, we have this model data. At the moment, it has most of the methods that we need, but we will need to create another one in just a moment. So we use this trait here, and then we are going to create one abstract method here, and that will require each subclass to implement it, basically to create this method and return back to us the instance of the given model. So we are going to start with abstract, protected function, model instance. And let's give it some dot blocks as well here. And it's not going to be mixed, it's going to be an instance of the model that we're going to get back from this method, and get instance of a given model. So now we are going to start with the first test, and our test will be called public function can create and return collection of models. And because it's a test, we need to add the test tag. And let me just create a few new lines here. Okay, so what we're going to start with, first of all, we are going to get our model. So model equals this model instance. So our subclass will return something like, for instance, new category. So this method model instance will return the instance of the category class, and this is what this model variable will then be associated with. So on this model, what we're going to do is to call create method. As you may remember, if we go back to the app directory, model, and then model, we have this create method, and this is what we are now calling. It takes an array of values that we want to pass through to the database, and what we are going to pass through to this method is going to be the method of this lookup data, and we are going to pass through an array of only name, which we want to be set to say name 1, and I'm going to do it 3 times. So let's duplicate this line twice, so name 2 and name 3. Obviously, we don't have this lookup data. This lookup data will return an array. So let's quickly create this method, and this method will be stored within this model data trait. So if we open this model data trait, and let's quickly create this method, it's going to be protected function lookup data, and it takes array of user data. So user data, by default, it's going to be empty array, and then property will be word. And what we doing here, basically, this property is going to indicate what sort of property we want to call on a faker instance. So return this merge data, and we passing through the name equals, and then this faker instance and whatever property you want to call on this. And by default it's word. Obviously, if we want to have integer or anything else that we may want to pull from a faker, that's what we can pass through as a second argument. So let's pass this as a property. You don't need to use these curly brackets again, that's my kind of thing. Feel free to use it or not if you don't want to. And then after this, with second argument to this merge data is our user data. So user data goes here, then semicolon, and that's all this lookup data method does. So let's quickly add dot blocks, and the next thing is going to be some summary let's say lookup table data. Let's save it, go back to our lookup model case. Now obviously this method exists, so it's no longer highlighted. So the next thing we are going to do here is to fetch all models. So models equals a model and all method, which will return all models from the database. Oh, sorry, all basically records of the given model type. So either it's category, it's author, or location, anything like this. So all of them from a given table. And now we're doing some assertions. So this assert equals, and let's go for the first one, name 1, and models collection, this array, first item, so index 0, and the name on this model. And if it does not, then we're going to say model name does not match name 1. So this is the first assertion, because obviously we created 3 of them. The first one should have this name 1 record, with second record should have name 2, and third record should have name 3. Obviously IDs are auto incremental, so obviously this all method should return them in the ascending order, because by default we're sorting by ID. Okay, let's copy this one and paste it underneath. This time we're looking for name 2. So index 1, second record, and obviously the message is going to be changed to does not match name 2. And then the same thing, this time name 3 with the index 2 and 3. So that's our first test ready. We obviously cannot test it because it's an abstract class. We need the instance of the model test. And let's have a look at this in a following video.